Oh, hello, everyone. Now we're at the live stream discussion after the debate.
At least they gave us something to point to when we are trying to give an example of the Overton window.
I was going to say, at least they gave us something to point to and laugh at.
Yeah, because the quote progressive Democrat that is the hope to save democracy, coming from a party that is actively suing third parties to get people off the ballot, saying that I've got all this support by arch conservatives like Dick Cheney. And then you have Trump that's like, Viktor Orban is just like my dude. And it's like that window. I mean, like when the quote savior of democracy party of the working person, which is bullshit. Sorry about the language. The Democratic Party is talking about how they're straight up supporting fracking and straight up expanding permits for fracking and drilling. Who is that appeal to? Who are they trying to appeal to? Like people that live in this world?
Oil lobbyists, obviously. Gotta get that sweet crude money.
It's very crude.
It just tells you
very crude
that voting for the lesser of evil is going to get you evil. Like, who was going to stand up for fracking? Like Hillary Clinton did. She lost because she didn't stand up enough for fracking. But the problem with the Democratic Party, I mean, there's myriad problems with the Democratic Party, but the reason that they can snatch a defeat out of the jaws of victory 99% of the time is their electeds and their donor class is so far to the right of their rank and file. Like, who would have thunk that it's a good idea to brag about Dick Cheney supporting you? It's just crazy.
Well, that is so weird that the Democrats 20 years ago at this time were like, Dick Cheney's the devil. And a lot of the same people who are still in there who are all like, now, Dick Cheney, look, he's great. He's supporting us because he's a Republican. And, this reminds me of something that I read in the book by Jacques Ellul. I'm probably mispronouncing that name. It's a French name. It's the French writer on propaganda. That's the name of his book, actually, Propaganda. And he wrote that it's very important when we're doing propaganda to get a member of the other side to repeat your message, because then it basically confirms for the people who you're trying to propagandize, in this case, the Democratic Party voter who might be a little bit shaky on Kamala Harris or whoever, or whatever's going on, might be a little bit shaky to now say, oh, look, it's okay for me to like Harris because look, Dick Cheney. If Dick Cheney likes her, therefore it must be fine for me to like. It's almost like a permission thing. That's one of the reasons why it's so important for Democrats to get Republican Party support. But the fact is that when people on the left who were around for the anti-war stuff in the early 2000s and that kind of stuff at the beginning of this century, not too long ago, remember who Dick Cheney actually is and what Dick Cheney actually stood for. And what Liz Cheney, more importantly, actually was and what she stood for. A person who threw her own sister under the bus because her sister came out as gay. So she's like, I don't support that. I don't support gay marriage at all. Basically threw her own sister under the bus for the purpose of getting votes in the state of Wyoming. Once we remember who these people are, I mean, there's no way that that's a positive thing for those people to endorse Harris. If they endorse Harris, that means that we should not be supporting. We shouldn't support whoever Dick Cheney supports. That's just, I mean, that seems to be like a no-brainer. Like that's like if the devil came out and endorsed Harris. Well, I guess he's not endorsing Trump, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing that you want to bear in mind is, while there are major contradictions, that the bourgeois class, the owning class, has a whole lot of solidarity. And regardless of how this shit comes down, they are going to do what they can further enrich themselves. That's why they tend to give money to both the capitalist parties, right, because they are capitalists. And if Trump wins or if Harris wins, the people that win are the bourgeoisie. It's not the working people in either case.
That's right.
And they both proved it over and over again.
Should we introduce ourselves? I wonder if there's anybody on the live stream right now who doesn't actually know us and who was invited to the live stream who's never ever had the opportunity to meet us. So maybe if we take a few minutes to introduce ourselves, I think that might be a great way to kind of segue into what we're doing tonight. Josh, why don't you go first?
I am the least important person on this call. But that being said, hey, comrades, my name's Josh Bradley. I'm running for City Council at Large in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was the first socialist candidate to run for City Council in at least 100 years because we could not find the last one.
Physically couldn't find him, or?
Well, we couldn't find any evidence that another socialist had run, but that's not to say that during the height of the old SPA, they didn't have people that ran. It's just we couldn't find. I didn't dig too hard before I was born in 74, so
Right.
You can see how that goes. Yeah, I'm a member of Socialist Party USA. I've been for many years, and member of the National Committee, and I'm also a member of the North Carolina Green Party. So both parties on the left that have been attacked by the Democrats.
Amy, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm on the National Committee of the Socialist Party USA. I'm a Green Party member, and I like to make memes.
Amy is the meme lord for our campaign. Stephanie, you're next. You're muted. Oh, still muted.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Okay, well, I'll go next then when Stephanie figure out her audio there. My name is Bill. I am probably slightly less important than Josh. However, I can officially state that the injunction against printing ballots in the state of Iowa has been cleared by the courts. Therefore, they are printing my and Stephanie's name on the state ballot in the state of Iowa. We actually got ballot access in the state of Iowa. Yes, I'll be able to actually vote for myself for the first time legitimately, legally. And I want to, give a shout out to Matt Erard if he's on this. I think it was largely due to his efforts that we actually got it done. I want to also, I don't know if any of the other people who are here actually signed up to be our electors, but I really want to thank them also for coming through for us at the last minute. We couldn't have done it without all these people working on this, and we really knocked it out of the park. And I'm just so proud of the work that we did as a group, and we got on the ballot in the state of Iowa, and so I'm very happy for that. And we'll wait for Stephanie to come back. While we're waiting for Stephanie to come back, we'll let her introduce herself when she comes back in. She's the vice presidential candidate, if y'all didn't know. Let's do takeaways from the debate. If you had to think about your biggest top three, maybe takeaways, you can do one if you want. We'll give it to you, Josh. What's your biggest takeaways of this debate?
Well, I guess Kamala Harris succeeded in treating Trump like the petulant teenage boy he was. But I still think that there is nothing that either party is offering that is going to help the working class at all. In fact, they went out of their way to say how much they didn't care about the environment. They're both really big on fracking. Harris was bragging about how the Inflation Reduction Act, which has been pitched as an environmental plan from the Democratic Party, it actually expanded oil and gas drilling and expanded fracking, which is terrible for the environment. And the other thing that I see is that the Overton window has gotten so far to the right that I don't know if we can peek around from the left anymore. And it was a perfect example because, like, Kamala was telling everybody how, all Dick Cheney and all these just objectively terrible people that have hurt people are supporting her now. And then Trump's response was like, dictators like me. Like, so where are working people involved in this conversation at all? And Harris name dropped UAW, but like any of the AFL-CIO unions, I appreciate that the work that they do trying to get unionized, but when they were asked by the Democrats to throw out all the communists and socialists, they did, and this is what we get. So I guess my last impression is that, I mean, if these are the two best that the capitalist parties could put up, and these are the only options that they are giving us to vote for across the country, then we are screwed and the world is screwed. Over.
Before we go to you, Amy, for your takeaway, I want to let Stephanie introduce herself, kind of tell us a little bit about herself, and then we'll go back to Amy.
Hi, I'm Stodden Cholensky. I'm the vice presidential candidate of the Socialist Party USA for 2024. I've been a party member for over 20 years. I've served as chair of the party for many years. I've been on the NC for well over a decade. I've founded several locals. I've helped with most of the presidential campaigns in that time period. And I also helped 3 socialist and Socialist Party members get elected here in Minneapolis over the last 3 years. And my pronouns are she, her. I would call myself a intersectional socialist feminist, and I'm more of a anarcho-communist, although I am a socialist. I do believe in socialism as a transitional state to full communism. I'm just very skeptical of state power. And I staunchly disagree with Josh's stance that he is the least important person on this call, because we are, first of all, we are not a top-down party and we are not hierarchical. But even if we were, I mean, he is an NC member. He was pivotal to getting the Northern Piedmont local, one of the more successful locals in the party, off the ground. We would not be here without Joshua Bradley and his work. I don't think anyone here, or most people who know of his work in the party, would disagree with any of that. He is very humble, which I do appreciate. But yeah, I'm just really happy to have this opportunity. And again, it isn't about me. It is a great honor to have this position, but really this is about putting the party's platform forward.
So if the party is not a top-down party but a bottom-up party, doesn't that make the least important person actually the most important person?
Oh, this is like the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Yeah, we are socialists from below.
Way to brag, Josh. Jeez.
Yeah, you're not humble at all, Josh. What the heck?
No, I'm the least important. I'm the most humble on this call.
That's a very
right.
Minnesotan thing. Humble brag.
Amy, takeaways.
Well, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, Neck or Neek. I loved his comment where he said they like to fight over who likes fracking the most. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so fracking true. And both their medical plans are payouts to the private insurance industry, and that's awful. It would be more cost efficient and better quality if we did socialized medical care nationally and forced our representatives to have the exact same coverage as the working class, because then they have incentive to make it the best darn medical care. Yeah, and neither one of them are willing to end the aid to Israel. Just like, we need to stop that. Just flat out, no more. You know, they're like, oh, I like bombing children more. That was horrible.
Yeah, it was like watching a cage match or a fight to the death over who could be the most pro-capitalist. I mean, bragging about what Goldman Sachs thinks as far as her economic plan. Who's more pro-fracking? Who's more pro-cop and pro military-industrial complex and anti-immigrant? It's sickening. And I want to ask people, like, do you truly feel that you are represented by either of these candidates? Because I really doubt there's too many Americans, unless they're incredibly wealthy, who feel that their interests are actually represented by these candidates, because they've made clear what they care about is cutting taxes on the wealthy and supporting this bloated military that is committing and supporting war crimes all across the world. And we do not have a democracy when these are our choices, because they've just made it clear that they have such a narrow view, and they differ only on these wedge issues, which I don't deny the importance of things like abortion and trans rights and immigration. But like, even their policies on something like immigration, they're fighting over who can be the most heartlessly cruel, shutting down the border and brutalizing immigrants. And Trump's repeating these horrible myths about immigrants. I mean, we're literally to the point where one of the candidates is talking about how immigrants are going to steal your pets and eat them. That's where we're at. And one candidate might push back a little bit, but their policies aren't all that significantly different. And it's just absurd. And if you care about democracy, it should be clear that the Democrats are not your champions. They're doing everything they can to keep any other candidate off the ballot. They're doing everything they can to push as far to the right as they can. And if you don't like where the US is at the moment, it isn't just Trump. It's clear that their hands are just as bloody as anyone else's, especially when it comes to things like Gaza. It's absurd.
Stephanie was talking about who's more pro-police. Like, Kamala Harris was our general attorney in California here, and she locked up Black people disproportionately to white people per capita, and then she kept them in jail past their sentences when they were supposed to be let free because she wanted to use them as cheap labor on our wildfires that are out of control. Like, slavery should be illegal. It's on our ballot like this year to stop letting our prisons do slavery. But Kamala Harris is all about the prison industrial complex. It's awful.
Yeah, she didn't earn the moniker the cop lightly. I mean, she actually earned that. Stephanie, do you have any other takeaways specifically from the debate?
Oh, I mean, we could go issue by issue.
Let's do top three.
Well,
So
I mean, let's be clear. What we have here is a political system where we have two parties that clearly, blatantly, unapologetically represent the wealthy and powerful. And there simply is no room for any even vaguely leftist point of view. And the thing is, Democrats tend to campaign a lot further to the left than they actually govern, especially if you look at like how Obama campaigned versus what he actually passed. So that's something that scares me even more, is their campaign mode. This is their like regressive promises that they're never going to fulfill. So if this is as far as to the left as they're even willing to pretend they are, like, where are they actually? Like, what are they actually going to pass? I mean, they very well may pass even stricter policies when it comes to immigration. They may well bring back things like the Muslim ban, for all I know. I don't know what their plans are, but and the Trump tax cuts. It's clear they're willing to do whatever it takes as long as they aren't moving anywhere near the left. They're going to just keep going right and keep going right. And they're going to use the threat of fascism, but do absolutely nothing to actually stop it. And Trump is talking about some really scary stuff. Like, he talks about how he's going to jail his opponents, and he says he's going to attack Marxists, which when he says Marxist, he obviously has no concept of what that is. Kamala, to be clear, is not a leftist. She's not a Marxist. And whether or not either actually know what that word means, they have nothing to do with Marxism. They're both neoliberal candidates that represent the owning classes and will do whatever it takes to keep the status quo. They're two different versions of the same coin. They both support keeping the wealthy and powerful in their place. And one version of that is kind of the kinder, gentler view of the Democrats, which at best want a more like social welfare state, but they don't even campaign that anymore. That was like the best of all worlds. And like, no one's even talking about the very vague centrist view of Sanders right now. They're at most center right. I mean, they're getting to the point where Dick Cheney is endorsing them for a reason. Dick Cheney is endorsing them because that's where they're at. You know, it's not like there's been some shift. That's where they're at. They are where people like Bush were so many years ago. And unless so much of the country has shifted that far right, which they haven't. To be clear, the people who are like hardcore Trump supporters are not the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans do actually care about things like living wage and healthcare. It's just that neither of these politicians actually support those policies. And our platform, if you break these things down, a lot of our solutions poll very well. And if their campaign was actually focused on the issues Americans actually care about rather than these issues like immigration and trans rights that people have been primed to think are dire threats to their freedom, which granted, if you are trans or undocumented person, their policies, both of their policies are dire threats to your freedom, because you have one side that is fully willing to scapegoat you and dehumanize you and take away any semblance of humanity you have under the law, and another that's willing to give lip service to your rights, but obviously not willing to do all that much to stop the Republicans when they attack you. But they use these culture war issues because they do not want to fight a class war. And when we have things like climate change and massive wealth inequality and Americans that truly do feel worse off because they are worse off, our wages are low, prices are high, and they talk about inflation, but they never talk where the minimum wage is at and wealth inequality, because those would be actual solutions. They just want to scapegoat and distract people with these issues that have nothing to do with capitalism, but capitalism is at the root of so many of these problems. And it's a sad thing that this is where we're at. And I really hope that somehow we find democratic solutions to these problems, because if we don't, we know where that goes. And that's why I'm running, is because I want peaceful democratic solutions to the issues we face.
It blows my mind how Kamala was talking about how pro-choice she is and the Democrats, and that seems to be like their talking point. If they were really pro-choice and pro-family and all of that jazz, you think they'd be pushing a federal job guarantee. Give people money at a thriving wage so they can afford to have kids. We've had a huge drop in our birth rate because nobody can afford children. Healthcare is too expensive, childcare is too expensive, college is too expensive. And what Bill wants to do is he wants to get us free pre-K through post-secondary education. That would make kids more affordable, you know? A federal job guarantee, the thriving wage, so people can afford kids. That's what lowers abortion, making kids affordable. And if somebody wants to get an abortion, that's their private decision with their doctor. We should have federal protections for bodily autonomy. And the Democrats say, oh, we will protect your rights, but they've had so many candidates and so many chances to codify Roe v. Wade, and they never did it. They just used it as a carrot on a stick to get our votes and to get our money.
You know, I heard a statistic a few years back that the statistic was, and I might have the statistic wrong, so if you guys know the actual statistic, let me know, that 50% of all women of childbearing age will have an abortion or something like, a DNC or something like that.
I believe it is 54% of people who have abortions already have a child. That might be the one you're talking about.
No, it's a more generalized statement to basically say that the use of abortion services cuts across class, it cuts across party affiliation, it cuts across ideology and religion, and I think the thing was 50%. That's probably not the right number, but it sounds right in my head, whatever the number is. But the point I'm making is that the majority, or the slim majority, or the definite majority of women in the United States avail themselves of and this is not just including abortion as you think of it, but also things like DNC and this kind of stuff to take care of miscarriages and things like this. I mean, those things would be banned under the Republicans' plan for anti-abortion. Any of these things that would terminate a pregnancy, even if the pregnancy isn't viable, would be classified as abortion, and they would go after the women that do that, and they would go after the doctors that perform those, even if those surgeries or those procedures were life-saving procedures. Now, I don't mind using myself as an example. When I was married, my spouse and I had a situation where we had a non-viable pregnancy. The mass that was growing inside my wife was never going to turn into a human being. And so we had to get that medically taken care of. And in every way except for the name, it was an abortion. I mean, they went in and they took it out, and it was never a human being. But the thing is that, like, under the laws that the Republicans want to bring in, she would have been criminalized for that. I mean, that would have been a criminalized procedure because of the fact that that was, something that had happened at the moment of conception, where it was just never going to be. But they still would have thrown her in jail. They still would have thrown the doctor in jail. And with those kind of penalties in place, the doctor that did that procedure for my wife at the time never would have done it. They would have been worried so much about criminal liability that they told my wife at the time, forget it, you have to deliver whatever this. And I just think of, like, so many people in this country who are in a similar situation. But the thing I want to say about it is, what difference does it make what the reason for wanting to have an abortion is? I think that the reason is where people bring the moral stigma to it. Like, who cares? Like, what difference does it make whether we're having a non-viable pregnancy, or a person carrying the child just can't afford to have another one, or like they were having intimate relations with their partner or something like that, and something happened and they didn't get to the morning after pill in time or something like that? What difference does it make what the reason is for it? I don't understand how the Republicans think that it's any business of theirs to go and interrogate these women about these decisions that they're trying to make, when I personally can go into any urologist right now and have my nads cut off, and no one is going to say anything about it. No one is ever going to say anything about it. If I choose to do that for family planning purposes, because I don't want to have any more kids, I can actually be chemically castrated if I wanted to. I don't know why I ever would be, but if I have the choice to do it, and nobody would ever question me because I'm a man. And that's just the truth. I'm a man. So I get to do whatever I want to my body. But you bring a woman in there and say, okay, woman, you should have the same rights as me. Oh, no, you can't do that because the Bible says that you're not allowed to do that. That's ridiculous to me. And so one of the things that was really the only daylight I saw between these two, as far as takeaways, the rest of it all was just basically appealing to the old school Reagan Republicans. It was like, who can be more appealing to the Reagan Republicans? I got Dick Cheney in my pocket, therefore I'm more Reagan Republican. I support fracking, therefore I'm more Reagan Republican. I support the wars going on, continuing to go on in the Middle East and in Ukraine, therefore I'm more of a conservative Reagan Republican. It was like they're playing for the same group of people. And I just don't understand. I just can't understand how it is that even Democrats who are older than the age of 40 years old can look at that and be like, oh, that sounds like something I like. Whatever Kamala Harris is saying, I like that. I like more policing. I like more border walls. I like more war. I like more fracking and more environmental destruction. I just cannot understand how anyone over the age of 40, but yet they're so afraid of that idiotic elderly buffoon, Donald Trump, who I mentioned. It looks like the dude has too many teeth. So he's not only old, but he's also a weird looking dude. And I just don't understand why he is like so like inspiring of this fear, this like dread. It's like whenever he walks through the room, people are just like, oh my God, it's Trump. Utter his name. Oh my God, we can't say his name because it might bring him out of the shadow. Why are they so afraid of that when they got basically the female version of him running against him and they totally support her? I just cannot understand this. When did Republicans start being the norm in this country, and the Democrats just totally like adopt their entire platform from 1980 and say that's what the Democratic Party platform is? I don't know when that happened, but whenever it did, it was just a travesty in this country. And you know what? One of the reasons I'm running is because I want this country to be better, man. I want the Democrats to do better. I know that they won't because they're so beholden to capitalism. And so I'm running to say we can do better than that. We can be a better country than that. I think most of the people in this country, just like what Stephanie said, if you read our platform point by point by point by point, people are like, yes, I like that idea. Love that idea. Yes, I think workers need to have more power in the workplace. Yes, I like environmental, preservation and not having chemicals dumped into my air and water. Yes, I like peace, and I want a peace dividend to utilize on things that we really need, like education and healthcare. Yes, I want people who are having trouble paying their bills, I want them to have access to the things that I take for granted. I want there to be equality between the races and between the sexes and between all nationalities. I want that. But then you stick the word socialism on it, and you put the color red on it, and people just like freak out and their hair starts on fire. And they run for safety. They run, excuse me for getting heated here. They're running for safety. I just don't understand it. It's like they're so terrified of this idiotic orange buffoon that they are going to endorse the cop. They're going to go support the cop and vote for the cop instead of voting for what they want, for what they know they want in their heart of hearts. They're voting for something that they are afraid of. They're voting out of fear. They're voting out of sheer terror. And last thing I'll say is Stephen King made that movie called It. This clown who lives in a gutter and has very sharp teeth and eats children and everything like this. And this inspired the fear, like the deep, horrifying dread of clowns in like 2 generations of people already. And I never, ever understood it because I didn't see the movie It when I was a little kid. So I never understood why people are afraid of clowns. To me, clowns are very funny. They're hilarious. They are like dudes with like crazy makeup and big noses and huge shoes. It's really funny. But there are so many people in this country that are afraid of clowns. And so I have a feeling that there's some relationship between that and, ironically, something that Stephen King, who is known to hate Republicans, did, and the reason why they're afraid of Donald Trump. I just have a feeling that there's like a relationship between the fear of clowns and the fear of Donald Trump, because he's the clown on the biggest stage. He's nothing but a buffoon. He's nothing but worthy of mockery. That's all he's worthy of. And yet so many 70, 80 million Americans are going to run away from him in fear to something that is almost just like him, but just maybe talks a little different, looks a little different, and is from the other side of the country. That's my takeaway. How fun.
It's laughable too, because this is an oligarchy. Our votes have zero influence on our government. Like, it doesn't matter if you vote Trump or Kamala. We will have the same oligarchs with their hands up their asses like puppets. You might as well vote your conscience, and as a protest vote, say, hey, no more genocide in freaking Gaza. Because no, do you really want to go down in history having your name recorded as supporting genocide? Like, yeah.
I'm not going to go down in history supporting genocide. At this point, I'd kind of like to, I see we have one serious participant in our discussion. Is there anybody out there, maybe Ken, if you want to offer a question? Did you want to ask a question? Maybe we can try to interact with the audience a little bit here. If you got any questions for me, for Stephanie, or for Amy and Josh. Josh is actually running for city council in the city of Raleigh, as he mentioned. While we're waiting for Ken, go ahead, Josh.
Okay, a couple of things. Abortion is actually, there's directions on how to do it in the Bible. So it's weird that they use religiosity to, especially Christianity, to do it, even though it's part of the Torah, which really predates Jesus of Nazareth by a lot of time. The other thing is that when they talk about abortion, and the way they try to limit it is to say that life begins at conception, which isn't biblical even a little bit, because if you read the Bible, it says you are created when you take your first breath, because it's the breath of God and all that other stuff. So even in the Bible, life doesn't exist until you take a breath, which basically rules out the entire pregnancy, right? Like, the other thing is, it's such a random point. I mean, they're saying that a zygote has the potential to be a human life, so that's when we should grant it full citizenship rights. But technically, eggs and sperm have the potential to create life. So why don't we just say that life begins at gamete production, and it would instantly make every woman a serial killer and every man a mass murderer. because if you're going to go with a random start to life, not before the brain is developed, not before any of that stuff, why not just go at gamete creation? If that's the case, as a teenager, I know I committed genocide the likes the which the world has never seen.
That is too much information. I know we got a small audience, and I know it's probably, like a fairly common experience, but
Well, they are fixing to ban all pornography in the Project 2025.
Yeah, good luck with that.
yeah, right.
They
were looking at I just want to say they were looking at pornography when Mount Vesuvius was burying the city of Pompeii in like ash and lava. So
Yeah,
if that ain't enough to stop it, Project 2025 isn't enough to stop it either.
Well, making something illegal obviously doesn't stop it. They can make a lot of things illegal. I'm sure there's many things they'd like to criminalize in order to bump up that prison population. I don't know if they're suggesting prison as the punishment for pornography, obviously. But I'm just saying, yeah, they're not going to stop it. But making it illegal is something they could feasibly do or try to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's problematic. It's entirely problematic. It's what they're trying to do. And as has been said before, Obama ran on codifying Roe versus Wade. He had the majority to do it, but instead he used his political capital to pass Romney Care, and didn't even push hard enough to get a public option. And that way, he could say that he tried to make it for everybody. He caved on the public option, and he did not codify Roe versus Wade, which he campaigned on.
That's an important point that you just raised there, Josh, because Romney Care, the public Medicaid option in the state of Massachusetts when Romney was the governor there, did have a state public option. And Obama said, well, we can't do it because it's the national. They could do it in Massachusetts. We can't do it because it's a national. That's the excuse he gave.
Oh, this is funny. Way back when Florida decided to make unborn clumps of cells in the womb people under the law and give them all the constitutional rights and protections under the law. Well, a Florida prisoner said, okay, well, my unborn fetus is being unlawfully detained. You got to release us both from jail immediately. And Florida decided no. So even though they have full protections under the law, not really. Yeah.
It's clear they don't care about children. If they cared about children, then the children of immigrants would matter. The Palestinian children that are dying at numbers I can't even begin to think about if I want to be able to get out of bed in the morning. It is absurd. They don't support paid family leave. They don't support pre-K education or even education. I mean, one of the things of Project 2025 is to actually just get rid of the Department of Education completely. And J.D. Vance came out staunchly against childcare, which I think he's called crap, or maybe even a worse word, because it is very clear that the foundation of fascism is always based in white supremacy and misogyny, because it is a hierarchical system where women always have to be underfoot. And he has made it clear that his ideal for women is to be, as the saying goes, barefoot and pregnant, and even to the point where he doesn't want anyone who doesn't have children even voting. And of course, someone like who was it? I know one of their Republican candidates for president was suggesting even raising the voting age to 25. So let's be clear. The reason that the Republicans are getting a bit desperate is because their base is dying off. And this is the base that the Democrats are desperately trying to appeal to, but neither are getting behind ideas that are all that incredibly popular with Americans. And that might seem odd until, well, everything they do seems a bit odd and not strategic, until you realize they are parties that their ultimate thing is to support and maintain the owning classes and not the working class. And that's why they don't get behind policies that, despite them being very popular, like raising the minimum wage and expanding healthcare, having universal healthcare, even things like mass transit and jobs guarantee. They do poll very well. You see how they're struggling to. The Republicans are in a tough spot because they've come out hard against reproductive rights, but Americans consistently, even Republicans, by and large, do not support a complete ban on abortion. They do support at least some exceptions because it's ridiculous not to. To have a complete ban on abortion, they have no answer for what do you do with something like an ectopic pregnancy. Despite what they may say, there's no way to re-implant embryo that implants outside the uterus. Abortion is the healthcare, that is the treatment for an ectopic pregnancy. It is life-saving care. So their solution under their law, if you really want a system, if you hate women so much that you would rather see them die than to have this freedom to make their own choices, that does mean people who have ectopic pregnancy either have to get a legal abortion or leave the state, or possibly if they have a federal ban, or all states ban it, I guess, to leave the country to get it. That's where we're at. I mean, they don't have solutions to these kind of issues. And really with the Republicans, the point isn't abortion. They use these wedge issues in order to, it's almost like the carrot that they get evangelical Christians who, if they were in any way true to their faith, they would be following the example of Jesus and caring for the poor and the sick and concerned with the most powerless and loving their neighbor rather than this blind worship of the wealthy and powerful and strength and all the trappings of fascism, obviously. But I mean, that's how they get evangelicals on board, is getting them, I don't want to say distracted, because these are important issues, but it isn't to vote on one single issue like that, no matter how important it is. It's not a coherent political platform. You need to have positions that make sense in other terms, not just we're going to ban abortion and everything else will figure itself out. But that's how they get Americans to vote against their own interests. Democrats too. They get people focused on culture war issues, which, while they are important, I don't want to come off as saying things like trans rights and immigrant rights are not important. But this is how they distract us from things like wealth inequality and Palestine and all the things we really should be talking about. If the thing is, if you care about freedom, which both sides like to say that they're for, freedom means not being under the thumb of your boss. You know, we like to say that we support democracy both in the political sphere and economic sphere. And quite frankly, in America, we don't have either right now. But if you support democracy, you need to have democracy in your workplace as well. Because when you go to work, your boss right now is basically, or whoever makes the decisions at wherever you work, is basically a mini dictator that has complete control over you in so many ways for that 8 hours or however long you're at work. We want workers to have power over their workplaces as well, because just because you're at work doesn't mean that your rights and freedoms go out the window. And so many workers are forced to sacrifice those just to make a living wage. And again, that's another way that many workers are, quite frankly, wage slaves, where they are forced to work whatever job they have to sell the only thing of value they have, which is their labor, in order to make ends meet, in order to eat. I'm not making the claim for UBI. I don't think that's ultimate solution. What we need to get rid of this system where we have an employing class that has all the money and the power, and a political system that completely supports them, where they fund all the candidates. And I mean, studies have shown that what American voters want has very little effect, if any, on policy. But what the wealthy and powerful want almost entirely guides policy. And it makes sense. They fund the campaigns, they write the laws, they are the ones calling the shots. And even if we were to get money out of politics, which is quite frankly not going to happen, even if the Democrats had any will to make that happen, which, if they wanted to be politically viable, they would. But to be politically viable isn't necessarily their goal. Their goal is to keep the owning class in power and to maintain the status quo. Even if we were to overturn Citizens United, there's just so many other barriers. Our current system simply does not protect the rights of working people and does not allow actual democracy where we can have more than two parties and candidates that actually support the working class. We are so far from that. And that's one thing we're trying to stress, is that we know that even if we were to get elected, we're not going to vote socialism into office. They would never allow that to happen. But we can use this as a platform to expose these contradictions and hopefully spread class consciousness to say, look, we know that neither of these candidates represent you, but there are solutions to these problems, and don't let them distract you with all this stuff. We need to be talking about socialism. We need to be talking about workplace democracy and all the ways capitalism is at the root of so many of these problems, and the ways, even if the Democrats were to win every single election and pass all their policies, which most of them they really don't have any intention of actually passing. It's all campaign promises. And even when they have the ability to do things like enshrine Roe v. Wade into law, they simply don't do it. And they don't have any intention to, because if they did that, what would they campaign on then? We really do need revolutionary system change, and I really hope we can do that in a peaceful and democratic way, because we are running out of time in so many different ways.
Speaking of running out of time, it's almost midnight on the East Coast. I think maybe to sort of wrap it up a bit, one thing I wanted to ask you guys is, are there any questions that they asked during the debate that you thought that the candidates, well, maybe I shouldn't say answered well, because I don't think they answered any of them well, but maybe had some like interesting ideas for, or do you just think all of the, because like the theme of our last discussion after the first quote unquote debate between Trump and the and his grandpa, Mr. Biden, we talked a lot about how they didn't answer any of the questions. So do you think that there are any that they actually answered? Maybe I guess that should be the question. Do you think there's any question that they actually answered in this debate with any substance at all? Or did they just like, whiff it? I think that we can go with Stephanie first, and then we'll go around.
Or what you would like to see a debate look like, or what questions you would like to ask. Because I personally would love to see an actual leftist debate, both of these candidates. Like even to have someone like Jill Stein would be amazing. But I want to give other people time to tell us what they'd like to see us talk about, or what they'd like to see presidential candidates actually cover in a real debate, because this was not a debate.
Amy?
Well, I'd love them to hold their feet to the fire on that whole Palestine thing, and that's for sure. Yeah, federal job guarantee. We need to expand the postal service, and it's a service. It's not a business. We shouldn't be worrying about profits. We should be worrying about serving our citizens and expanding the post service to cover banking. They did that once before, and it was wonderful, and they never should have stopped it. There's all these check cashing, hole in the wall, flim flam places that are totally sticking it to the workers who can't get banking accounts for whatever reason. If they could just go to the postal service and cash their checks, they'd be a lot better off, and they wouldn't be paying a percentage to these cash checking shams.
As a former letter carrier, I think it was either Josh or one of the people who mentioned that they required sometime in the 70s or whatever, after the Postal Service went on strike for a long time, they required them to fully fund their pensions for 8 years. That means that while normal places who have pensions fund it year after year after year, and if they need more, they'll put more into it, the Postal Service has to demonstrate that they are fully funding their pension for 8 years, which is the reason why it always appears like the Postal Service is in the red, and they don't get money. They're fully self-supported. They're supported by postage and by freight charges. They don't get money from the federal government. They're completely and totally separate from the federal government. So anyone that's going out there saying, oh, well, this these people are ripping the government off and all this other stuff. No, as a matter of fact, the U.S. Postal Service doesn't get any money from the federal government, and they're also federally required to fund their pension for 8 years, and to demonstrate that they fund their pension for the next 8 years. Now, that might be, like a responsible way of doing things, but it also makes them look like they're always running, into debt, when as a matter of fact, they're not really running into debt. But it creates this whole attitude in the country about the Postal Service, that the Postal Service is just mismanaged, it's evil. And yeah, I mean, they're like, they can improve letter delivery it shouldn't take 6 days to get a letter across the country in this day and age. I mean, that's ridiculous. And they shouldn't charge me $70 to do something overnight when they could very easily do that thing for half that. But that's neither here nor there. The fact is that all of the bad things that people use to hit the Postal Service are just straight up lies. And because it just is representative of the fact that people don't know what they're talking about. And the Postal Service, like the Department of Education, also very underfunded, by the way. The Department of Education is just very convenient punching bags for the right. That's all they ever do, is just punch on these public services that benefit so many millions of people in this country, because they want to privatize everything. And we were making a joke about how they were doing like this debate, and then they had chicken commercials and Viagra and Boeing and BlackRock commercials on ABC. And I didn't watch ABC, so I don't know, but I'm willing to bet there was some Viagra commercials on the commercial breaks between the debate. So it was like U.S. politics brought to you by Cialis, or whatever the hell the penis pills are. That's getting a little bit off.
When you do see the Democrats, it does make you think of impotence. I mean, what comes to mind for me.
When I see Donald Trump, I also think of impotence too.
But with the Postal Service, there's some legitimate criticisms that could be made, and that's the Postmaster General that Trump appointed has been disassembling the sorting machines that made our mail faster, like he's purposely slowing it down. I think he's sabotaging it because he wants it privatized. I think this is a willing act of sabotage.
Oh, without a doubt. And the Democrats aren't doing anything to stop it.
No, the Democrats are actually overseeing the burning of Minneapolis, though, Stephanie.
Yeah. The post office is something that Americans should actually be very proud of, though. I mean, even with all the sabotage, we have one of the best postal services in the world.
That's right. And we also have the oldest postal service in the world, too. Our postal service was mandated. One of the very first things that the Constitution mandated was a postal service. So that actually predates the Republic.
And it doesn't cost taxpayers money, right? Like, it's not. But if you want to see the short-term thinking of businesses, go to whatever company you work for and to suggest that you mail everything out using FedEx. See how that goes. Like, back when I used to cut 500 checks every week to send out to all our vendors, if we had to FedEx every check that went out there, that would have been crazy. If we'd had to UPS every check that went out, that's crazy. Like, the letter rate's what, 64 cents metered? Right.
Well, and these companies rely on the last mile service of the USPS. One reason that they are profitable is because they use the USPS for the sections that are too expensive for them.
That's completely accurate, Stephanie. As a matter of fact, when I worked for the Postal Service, there wasn't an Amazon warehouse within 100 miles of Fargo or whatever. And so Amazon sent their last mile packages all through the USPS. That's all we did on Sundays was deliver Amazon. That's the only thing we did. I would fill the whole mail truck up with these stupid Amazon packages because Amazon was getting such a killer rate from the Postal Service. And if they had to ship it through the private sector, like FedEx, that would have charged them an arm and a leg to get that stuff to those places. But through the USPS, it was basically nothing. So even the businesses don't believe in privatizing everything. The only people who do are idiots and Republicans, who might be the same people.
Yeah. But my takeaway from, if you want to hear it, my takeaway from the debate, the questions, the only thing that I really got is that Trump doesn't like anybody that's not Trump unless they're a dictator. And the only thing I got from Kamala Harris is some, talk about protecting women's reproductive rights a little bit. I mean, but the main thing I got from her is that she loves fracking, and she thinks that we need to diversify our fossil fuel extraction. And apparently, I mean, she's got at least a stepdaughter who is not very young, so maybe 60 years will be fine. But like when it comes down to it, like climate change is an existential threat. And when she said that it's an existential threat, and then at the same time said that she 100% supports fracking, which poisons the groundwater, has caused earthquakes, and is just generally bad because methane is very, very, very much a greenhouse gas. You can't, on one hand, say that climate is an existential crisis, and on the other that fracking is good and I'm not going to ban fracking. And in fact, we expanded permits for fracking and oil exploration. Basically what you're saying is that it's an existential threat, but fuck it, we're going to die anyway, so let's just speed it up so the rich people can keep their money. Over.
Yeah, another thing, you can't really say that you support peace and ceasefire in Gaza and then turn right around and say, I'm the hugest friend in the world to Israel, because Israel is the one that's doing all the shit there. Let's just be honest.
Oh.
I can't talk about Hezbollah. I mean, like, it's literally like me being so pressed by a fly flying around in my house that I'm going to go burn my whole house down. I mean, that's really the analogy. And not only that, kill my dog at the same time. It really doesn't make any sense. So there's just so many things that she said that's just like immediately she contradicted and to out the Republican on the stage.
Yeah, and one other thing about Gaza, and she said that it all started in October, and it's like no, it absolutely didn't just start in October. It started in the late 1800s, like the early 1900s. And if you keep people in an open air prison and there's an apartheid state, and I'm not going to stand for any religious authority in any government, but what do you expect? When has oppression ever made people less likely to rebel? Like when has oppression been the solution? So you have people that have had their land stolen, have been thrown off of their land, have been killed in large numbers, have been excluded from the workforce, and have been pushed into very, very small pockets of where they had lived for thousands of years.
It's a ghetto. Let's call it what it is. It's a ghetto.
But how would you have them not respond if the tables were turned and a different outcome came from before or during partition, and it ended up that the Israelis were pushed into small pockets that were being settled? How would they react? How would they react? Would they be like, yeah, no, I understand that I can't drive on a road through my town because I want to make it more accessible to people that have stolen my land?
Right. My life should be sacrificed for your peace. I wouldn't accept it.
Yeah, let's put everyone in an open air prison and drop bombs on them. It's horrid.
Yeah, but that's what it comes down to, is that, like, oppression is never going to create peaceable citizens, right? It's just not. It hasn't.
Right.
Because there will always be an act of escape. People try to escape prison. People fought back. Are they the same people that are so down on Gaza because of the thing that happened on 6, which was probably pretty horrifying? Are they also going to criticize the Warsaw Ghetto uprising? Because they were oppressed people that rose up.
But it's different when they do it, though, Josh.
They did what?
It's the law is for thee, not for me.
Yeah.
I know we have to wrap up. I did want to leave on a little message of hope. And I want to stress, so we do meet every Thursday for study group. The study group is one of the entities that is supporting this live stream. So check out leftunitystudy.com. And definitely check out the Socialist Party USA, because we are an independent socialist party that is fighting for real change outside the Democratic Party. And I don't know what better argument to make for the Socialist Party or some independent leftist party being the solution we really need to work for if we want real change, other than this debate. I mean, we see that they have no intention of even claiming to offer any sort of leftist solutions. And I realize the left is not in a great state, not just in the US, but worldwide. It seems like the right is having a moment, and I hope that what we see now is kind of the nadir of socialism in the US. And I do honestly believe that we are at a turning point where we are going to see massive growth in socialism, especially when independent socialism, when it is clear that the Democrats have no intention of being a leftist party or even pretending to appeal to leftists, even in their campaigning, even when they need our votes. You know, we don't struggle for any sense of purpose in what we do, because we offer solutions to the problems they talk about. What do they have to offer other than scapegoating and fear? And I mean, what do the Democrats offer than other than, yeah, a return to this this mythical past when capitalism supposedly was better, when we had a stronger middle class, but things were still not all that great. I mean, we do offer real change and a real alternative, actual democracy, not just political democracy, which we don't even have when we have choices like this, but workplace democracy in every part of our life. Capitalism is unsustainable, and one way or another, it will fail. It will end. The question isn't whether that's going to happen. We cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet. The question is whether we go with it. And now is the time to act. And it is clear the Democrats are not willing to do any of that. We need to start building movements outside the Democratic Party. And luckily, you know, here in the Socialist Party, we have been doing that for a long time. We have some very skilled activists. We are all very stressed out and overworked, and we really need your help. So please join and help us out, because you will find solidarity with people who are new and have been doing this for a long time. But we definitely can't do it alone. But we are working to build a grassroots socialism from below, multi-tendency party outside the systems of capitalism and outside the Democratic Party for real change. And we can win elections even. We've seen it happen here in Minneapolis. And the elected officials we've had have done so much more than the Democrats have, even though the Democrats control all the levers of power and have all the funding and everything. Just actually getting someone in there that has the will to change and isn't subject to that system of control is almost miraculous to see. But we need more people to get on board to get this off the ground. And I really do have faith for a better future. And if you are downtrodden because you see things like this debate and you see that they obviously are basically speaking another language, they don't represent you. I don't even know who they represent, because I just can't relate to what it's like, what it is to be 1% in the US. But another world really is possible. And if seeing this, you know, really drags you down and you feel like you don't have meaning, there is another way, and we could use your help. It doesn't matter where you're at. We can plug you into so many different projects, but please check us out. And, you know, a lot of it's kind of a slog, calling people and doing a lot of the hard work, but it isn't just that. We're friends, we're comrades, we have fun. And it really, I believe getting involved in this really did save my life, because it really did give me meaning at a very low point in my life many years ago. And I see this desperation and this despair when it comes to climate change, when it comes to politics, when it comes to so many people, especially in young people, but not just young people. So if you're feeling that, we can't give you all the answers. We don't claim to have all the answers, but we do know that there are policies that work, and we do understand the roots of these problems. So please join us, because we can only do this together, and you would be welcome. Check out our statement of principles, and I hope whoever you are out there, I get to work with you in the future.
With that, we will end this live stream, this post-debate postmortem. If you're in Iowa, you actually can vote for Comrade Cholensky and myself for president and vice president. And also, if you're in Massachusetts, I believe, in where else? We got right in Michigan, I think we're right in Guam. I think we're actually on the ballot in Guam. And I think there's one more that Maryland will be on the ballot. And we're also working on about a dozen other states to get write-in status. So if you're in those states,
Maryland, I'm going to be in Detroit too. If you can come and I believe Bill is going to be joining me in Detroit at some point as well, hopefully for a speaking event. So
okay. That'd be ideal. I got budgeting to do, but we'll work on it. We'll get that message out when Stephanie gets up to Detroit. We'll get that event out on the Facebook and also our other social media outlets. But right now, thank you all for joining us. And Dick, I see your comment there. I'm not sure what that's referring to, but we'll end the yapping, the catastrophic yapping. Good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.